After 41 painstaking Parisian phases, Ireland out half Johnny Sexton stepped up to land a monstrous drop goal that sealed one of the all-time dramatic Six Nations victory last Saturday. But although Ireland beat France in Paris, a few questions still remain ahead of Italy at the Aviva Stadium this Saturday. Welcome to the Left Wing Live, streaming on the independent.ie Facebook page in association with Aer Lingus. I'm Slattery, joined as always by Luke Fitzgerald. Luke, we are both on Paris for one of the all-time dramatic Irish rugby moments. Not a great game, but a spectacular memory.
You said it was the best finish to the worst game I think I've been to in quite a while. Look, it was fantastic. I mean, you could see it from the support in the Stade de France. There was, a huge amount to all the travelling support, and obviously with the pylon at the end, I wouldn't have minded being in there myself.
No injuries, thank God.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, look, it was great to see, and it obviously made a huge amount of them. And I think it could stand to them, long term to get a win like that.
Yeah, and it's left us with plenty to talk about tonight. Here's what's coming up on the show. We're going to start with Johnny Sexton's last gasp drop goal to win the game, an absolutely spectacular moment for Irish rugby.
We'll be discussing some of the issues that are still outstanding for Ireland.
And there was plenty of other rugby over the weekend as well. Wales really laid down a marker against Scotland, while England's attack looked razor sharp in Rome.
We'll have our Ireland v Italy preview. You can ask your questions at Slattery Will, at LukeFitz11, or you can comment under the live stream. We'll get to as many questions as we can.
And a little later on in the show, I'll have information about how you can take part in a great competition in association with Aer Lingus, where you and a friend can win 2 tickets to see Ireland take on Italy at the Aviva Stadium this Saturday. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And I'm also delighted to be joined by none other than the esteemed rugby correspondent for the Irish Independent, Rory O'Connor. Rory, you've been to Paris a couple of times covering Ireland. It doesn't get any easier. I thought we'd maybe gotten past that thing of Paris still being a graveyard no matter what form the French team are in, but we were drawn into a dogfight and it required a moment of, I wouldn't even say magic, it supersedes that to get out of jail.
Certainly doesn't get any easier for the poor old journalists who have to change the reports at the last minute. But we didn't mind, with last gasp Ireland winner, that does the trick. Look, I think there's certain truths in Six Nations rugby that we maybe sometimes get away from when we're previewing tournaments, and one of them is Wales are really strong in Cardiff, and we should never forget that, and Ireland will always find it difficult in Paris, no matter what state France are in. Just whatever it is about that bloody stadium, and go back to Thierry Henry and all the difficult days that they've had there since they've won it. Aside from the 2014 game and the Brian O'Driscoll game, it's just a hard place to go and win. And even France with a new coach and all that, it was a difficult day for Ireland, who kind of ran aground, and it was very similar to 2016. But I think the way they won it, you reference it there, is going to stand to this Irish team long term. Just like the All Blacks in Dublin in 2013 stood to them when it came to the World Cup. Steve Hansen mentioned it. I think that is a win that they will go back to time and time again when they're in a difficult position. And for all that they struggled before that, I think they'll take huge positives from going 41 phases to win the game.
Yeah, the 41 phases Rory mentions is key, because obviously Joe Schmidt's Ireland team pride themselves on being efficient at everything they do, but for the first 77.5 minutes, that wasn't really there. They missed a couple of chances when they were in the 22. Johnny obviously pulled that kick badly wide, but for 41 phases, the rucking was very, very good. They recycled the ball well. There was even a bit of ingenuity with that great cross kick to find Keith Earls. So obviously the first 77 minutes weren't great, but they did kind of go back to their core values and get things really right in that key end game.
Yeah, they did. Look, it was a really tight game. I think the conditions were definitely a leveller. It was far more difficult than it would have looked on television. When I was down pitch side just before the game, it was really, really wet out there and difficult. And I think, Ireland you probably see it from time to time against Wales, that one out passing from 9 to the forward pod. It's actually not a great play, especially if you don't have much, if there's not much interplay there. It's very difficult to break teams down. You don't have to do much thinking. And I think that's a key part if you want to break down defence, if you want to get, I suppose, a bit of momentum in those tight places against what is a really, really big, strong French pack. And that's probably why we struggle against this team a lot, and why we struggle against Wales. They're big men out there. So there's a few things for the guys to work on, absolutely. And I think what is encouraging, and you referenced it there, and as Rory did as well, I think those 41 phases, that'll build in that belief. When things are tough, there's going to be times when the weather's not good, when things aren't going for you in attack, that you can rely on that. You can go back to that place. So I think this is really, really big for the team going forward.
I look at it, Rory, one try in the last 4 Six Nations games against France. You mentioned the similarities of 2016. It was almost a carbon copy other than the drop goal. But you'd like to think in the intervening 2 years that Ireland have come on a huge amount. So why do you think maybe they struggled to create chances, or to take the chances that they did create?
I don't need to create an awful lot, and I think the conditions, I don't think we can get away from them. I think sometimes we can underestimate them up in the stand, and how difficult it is down there. I think that made Ireland tighten up. I thought the ambition from the start was really impressive. I thought they kind of continued on from November, but they got dragged into a game that didn't want to be part of. Their ruck was very, very difficult for them, and I think Nigel Owens, the way he policed it, didn't do them any favours. We've seen in previous Six Nations, Wayne Barnes in particular, if you're on the wrong side and you stay there any longer than a second, that's a penalty. Owens was letting the French lie all over the ball.
Lucky not to get a card, Valmoina.
Absolutely, yeah.
There was 5 penalties.
But they played the ref better than Ireland did it in that department. I think they slowed Ireland's ball down, and Ireland relies so much on lightning quick ball to get their plays going. They didn't get it. The Murray was up, and Sexton were both operating off slow ball, and that's probably why they went to those one out phases. But when they needed to, their fundamentals around the breakdown kicked in, and I think that's going to stand to them so much.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people, kind of a few journalists honing in on one specific breakdown from Fergus McFadden came out of nowhere and just cleared it out really well. I guess that's the kind of small little nitty gritty details. Not only is why he's always often in Joe's squads, but that Schmidt really does like from his players.
Well, he likes guys who work really hard, who are up for the contact. It's so important now. You just can't have a weak spot in your game because you'll get exposed, and I think you see that at the top levels, and that's why someone like Fergus McFadden is invaluable in a Leinster team and in an Irish team. You see how he's turned things around in Leinster. I mean, you saw how poor the defence was coming into that away game against Glasgow, the first round of the Champions Cup, and you saw how he's been able to shore that up and how valuable that's been to the team. So I think it was great to see him involved. It's great to see him back in there after what has probably been a difficult couple of seasons injury-wise, and good to see him do so well.
Yeah, Rory, let's talk about James Ryan. He was obviously the big selection talking point coming into the game. He seemed to play really well. He made the step up, I wouldn't say easily, but he looked very much at home.
Yeah, he's born for this, isn't he?
I'd say easily. Jeez, he looked bloody great, Will.
Yeah.
I mean, that was for a Six Nations debut. That was incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we've heard about this guy for quite a long time. He's been flagged as the second coming of Paul O'Connell, and he looks like Paul O'Connell with possibly with better hands. I mean, he's just, he's a phenomenal athlete to carry with Ireland always struggled with the French power. He didn't look like he was out of his depth in that regard. He went forward. One of his tackles when he had to readjust, and he met, I can't remember which carrier it was. He met the carrier on the gain line, but he had no right to win the collision, but he did. Yeah. And he had no momentum behind him, but he just, whatever way he managed to get his technique was so good. He had one bad error, but if you take that, everyone's going to have a bad error on their Six Nations debut in Paris. The overall was so positive, and himself and Henderson together were really dynamic. I thought Henderson was excellent, particularly in the last couple of phases.
That catch, the catch alone to get it all
I think
started.
throughout his hands were very good. He was operating as a bit of a playmaker. That combination, if they can keep both of them fit, is so dynamic and so positive for Ireland in changing the way Joe Schmidt wants to play the game.
He's got a huge amount of belief. I mean, he was one of the guys from, in the early parts of the game, as Rory mentioned, where Ireland were probably, they had one or two expansive bits, but I think the weather gradually just, it got in on the game eventually. But it was some of the handling. I think Ryan, I was just thinking in his first Six Nations cap, that he threw one ball out the back to Johnny Sexton, which kind of unlocked the French team out wide. And I just thought, that's a guy with belief. Yeah. And that's the key part. There's loads of brilliant athletes. You come across them all the time at interprovincial level, but making the step up, that's upstairs, and he looks like he's got it. So that's why I think people are touting this guy for great things.
And even the fact that Ian Henderson called the first line out to the tail to James Ryan just shows that they believe in him as well.
Yeah.
Apologies for that little issue with the sound there. It's fixed now. So just one question I wanted to ask you guys is about the Irish midfield. Henshaw and Bundyaki, they've played together in the autumn, again, in the Six Nations. They obviously had a very solid outing. Defensively, they were quite good. They did carry the ball hard, but there wasn't a whole lot of creativity in that area. What did you make of how they performed?
Probably were a little bit curtailed in that department with the conditions. I think it's a really nice combination to have very, very physical. You can build a lot of plays around those guys because both of them actually can handle the ball. I think with Joe's game plan, oftentimes they could be probably a little bit more direct. He's very collision oriented. He likes to get momentum, and I think he backs Conor Murray and Johnny Sexton to playmake, and they're his playmakers. What I feel, I think sometimes you see it against Wales, and we've seen it a few times against France as well, is that if one of those guys is caught up in a breakdown, when you don't have any creativity, it's why someone like Joey Carberry or someone else with a bit of ball handling ability, either in the centre, Chris Farrell or whoever it may be, they need one more playmaker. I think you need three guys there.
Jared
Payne is actually a good guy for that as well. you need to, it's either at fullback or one of the guys in the centre.
Well,
You
you'd love
need
to see
them.
Joey Carberry get a run at fullback at some stage.
Yeah, but Rob Kearney had a really good game there as well, you know. But despite the mistake for Teddy Thomas try, he was outstanding in the air. And in a game like that, that was really, you know, it was something that the team could hang its hat on. You know, you knew he was reliable. You knew he was going to get you a few balls back in the air, and that was really big for the team in the game. But they do need to find some other playmaker, because otherwise, you know, without having a third pass option, you have Murray to Sexton, but you need one other playmaker to possibly give the defence a little bit of decision in the outside channels, Rory. And that's, for me, one thing that I think is making it difficult for Ireland teams to break other teams down, even though they're having loads of possession at times.
Perhaps it's just the standards that Ireland have set for themselves over the last 3-4 years with Joe Schmidt in charge. But going into this game, like, a few people were like, you know, urging caution, and kind of what you said there, like, France is always such a tough place for Ireland to go, no matter really what the form book has been. But I really thought that Ireland had gone past that with the coach they have, with the form the team were in, with the opposition they were up against in particular, the way the 19-year-old 10, all this. I just don't really understand. The two experts here make me understand why it was so tight in the end.
I think the conditions, like, you
They
never
can't
want
just be that simple.
Yeah, well, I think they didn't help themselves. I think there was a couple of areas where they're usually really good that they weren't as good as they usually were. I thought the kicking out of hand to contest was an issue. I think they tried to find touch a few times, especially, but they only really did that from an attacking sense when they were in France's half. They only really had attacking kicks from scrums, from midfield scrums. I think they tried it 2 or 3 times. I actually thought that was an area where they could have mixed the game up. I think Johnny Sexton had a really good one, a diagonal one in the corner in the first maybe 10, 15 minutes of the game, which really settled them down. They didn't really have, maybe there wasn't another opportunity, but they didn't try any crossfield kicks. There was no real grubbers. A few things like that, even the high balls, I thought from out of defence, areas where Ireland usually get momentum. I mean, Conor Murray, for me, he's the best box kicker in the game. And I thought he had a bit of an off day in that area, which is very unusual for him. Now, I thought, coupled with that, I thought Johnny as well had a few where I think they'll look at it and go, you know what, we can be a lot better in that area next week. And that's something where I think they'll look to get a bit of momentum next week.
I think they relied quite a lot on scoreboard pressure, and I think there was a critical moment early in the second half when they were either 6 points up, and they carried the ball close to the French line, and Poirot forced a turnover with no tackle release.
I think I remember it.
And if that should have been a penalty to Ireland, they went down the other end and they got a penalty, and it just, I think that was a big moment in the game. I think Ireland would have gone to the corner, could have scored, and suddenly Ireland are 11 or 13 points clear of France. And for all the little flaws that were there, they were building the score. I think the concern is that they lost their way during the second half, but the way they arrested the momentum back in their own favour would make you feel a little bit more comfortable with that, because in the past they've let games get away from them and not been able to get it back. But to go and do what they did at the end, I think it is a massive comfort to them as they try and correct the flaws that are there, because we know they're a better team than the way they played for particularly in that second half.
We've some messages in now, and I'm just out of word, I guess, on a few decisions that maybe changed things. Like Rob Kearney looked like taken out in the air for that high ball.
That was bizarre, because I was talking in the comment.
I just want to get to a couple. We got a few messages in. Kieran Doolan, first of all, why did Joe wait so long to get Cronin on the pitch? It looked like we were crying out for maybe a bit of extra ball carrying.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. You know, I think Joe is really, like, he's really fancies Rory best. He has for a long time, even when, you know, there's times where I feel like he probably hasn't been playing his best rugby, and I think there's definitely no difference between the throwing. That's a misconception that's out there. You know, I think actually Sean Cronin's stats when he actually starts the game, like most hookers, is far, far better. So I don't really see the issue there. I don't know why Sean Cronin doesn't get picked, but because I think he adds a huge amount of value going forward. He's so dynamic.
And I'll let you tackle this one from Martin Mulrennan and Rory. If you could bring a wildcard player into the team, who would you bring in? We arguably miss Zebo's flair at fullback or on the wing.
Yeah, I mean Jordan Larmour will be the wildcard element, or even bringing Carberry in, but I do like Rob Kearney there at fullback. I think at test level, I think maybe Carberry bringing in Larmour on one of the wings would give Ireland just a bit of extra pace, a bit of extra zip. Like they engineered a couple of nice wide breaks, but they didn't quite get anyone into space. If you got Larmour that little bit of space, I think he could do a lot of damage. Obviously he's uncapped, he's inexperienced. But there's a chance this week to get
himself and Earls would be a nice little combo, wouldn't they? I mean, the footwork of the two guys.
Yeah, to be fair to Earls, he was one of the few Irish backs who did do himself justice, I thought, going forward on the day.
Yeah, I thought he was really, really
limited enough.
He's playing he's playing some brilliant rugby, and I mean, I think he'll probably be a little bit disappointed with some of the tackles on Vakatawa. He definitely could have done better, and he's actually an excellent tackler. So there's a few little bits to tidy up in his game, but he's growing into it as well. First time out, and let's face it, Vakatawa is a pretty tough guy when he's got the ball in hand. So look, playing really well, great to see him. They need to get him into the game as much as possible. He's so dynamic.
I think another player you wanted to mention, Rory, was Dan Levy, who came on for Josh van der Fleer, who unfortunately has been ruled out for the season. But I guess at least Dan Levy showed that there's a good ready-made replacement there.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of concern about the back row stocks now that Josh van der Fleer has been ruled out for the season, which is a real shame because he's been playing brilliantly, and I didn't think he let himself down at all. I did think that the back row combination of O'Mahony, van der Fleer and Stander put a lot on Stander's shoulders when it came to the ball carrying, and when Dan Levy came on, he took that responsibility.
He's so strong, isn't he?
He's built for it. A bit like James Ryan. I think he always believed that he'd get to this level. He's very confident. He's
very confident. I can tell you that.
We interviewed him after the game, and he was happy to say he was really disappointed not to get the nod in selection. I think his form has been good through the Pro 14. He made a big impact against Exeter before Christmas. He's an excellent player.
And Christmas Interpros as well.
He owned it against Munster, and that was a full-strength Munster team. So, look, I don't think there's any weakness with Dan Levy coming into the team. I think he really adds a lot in terms of your ball carrying, in terms of his strength over the ball. I think there's a little bit of concern about what's below that now, because I think they're one injury away from a bit of a back row crisis, because there's a lot of big names out in that department. But I don't think there's any. I think Levy added to the team when he came on.
He was superb.
He was really good.
He was a standout, Will, for me as well. He's so aggressive, and he hangs in there that extra second that you think is, it's nearly from a healthcare perspective, it's not a good idea. But Jesus, he was bloody great out there, and it was great to see young guys stepping up in a cauldron.
Yeah, we'll move on to the rest of the teams in just a second. But let's just talk about that HIA controversy towards the end of the game, Rory, quickly. Just maybe for people who aren't too familiar with the ins and outs of it, because there was maybe a little bit of confusion, could you just talk us through briefly what happened? Yeah,
well, there was two of them. There was Jalabert in the first half, and there was Dupont in the second half. Both went down with what looked like knee injuries, and were brought off for head injury assessments. There's an investigation ongoing through the Six Nations to see if there was anything awry with it. It seems to have come from the matchday doctor, rather than the French themselves. Although the second one, Nigel Owens, certainly tapped his head and seemed to suggest straight away that it was. It allowed Machino to come back on. There's been a bit of confusion over whether he was allowed to take the winning kick. He didn't. Bello did. Apparently he is allowed. There's nothing in the rules to say he isn't. He's a better kicker than
Much
Bello.
better,
I think it cost France the game, but he shouldn't have been. If it was a knee injury, and it was quite clear it was a knee injury, he shouldn't have been in that position.
The only thing is though, those kicks kind of balanced out. I think Johnny probably missed one that he would usually get. So for me, it wasn't, but it was odd. And they have a bit of form here as well, which is a bit unusual. I thought last year against Wales in the competition, that's what's really causing, I think, the angst out there, and people want to get an answer and find out if there is something that's gone awry in the system. And it's important because you can't devalue, like HIA is something that we're placing huge importance on in the game, and we need to make sure that if that's what's happening, that people aren't taking advantage of it. So we'll have to wait and see what comes out of the investigation.
Definitely. Now we're going to talk about Wales, Scotland and England, Italy in a second, but first it's time for the competition. We're giving you and a friend the chance to support the Irish team against Italy in the Aviva Stadium this Saturday. With thanks to Aer Lingus, the official airline of the Irish rugby team, we've 2 tickets up for grabs. To enter, just go to independent.ie/the left wing com and tell us what was the score in Paris last Saturday between Ireland and France. Closing date is Friday, February 9th, and the best of luck. Okay, we'll go on to the rest of the action now. Wales-Scotland was, I guess, obviously from an Irish perspective, that was the big game, but the most interesting result for me was Wales-Scotland. Scotland went in with a lot of expectation. I read Kenny Logan's column earlier. He summed it up well for me. He said that it looked like Finn Russell was prepared to play beach sevens rather than Six Nations game. He was very loose. He was trying a few backdoor offloads that hit the deck. I don't know how you can see this result 34-7, because everything was telling you that Scotland would either get a big win or go damn close. Yeah,
well, I think it just shows those November internationals obviously count for nothing, or because Scotland were on fire, and we were really excited to see them in their first outing against Wales in the Principality, and I think it was really, really disappointing. I thought for me the standout part was the defence. Look, the lack of respect for the ball is something that because it had some really nice play. Some lovely play. There was guys, they were in the 22. I think that turnover, the Navidi turnover, there was some lovely build-up play there. So they were, the rugby, I'm not sure that the standard of rugby was the problem going forward, but the defence at times was tragic. I thought Rhys Patchell was allowed to do whatever he wanted, and he looked like an absolute superstar out there at times. So that's something that they need to get fixed really, really quickly.
I hate to do this, but I did call this on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. Like, Scotland are Scotland, and they remain Scotland.
You did actually.
The preeminent rugby correspondent. That's why I shout you with praise.
There's a reason Warren Gatland only brought 2 of them on the lines. He watched what happened to Twickenham last year, and it's happened again. And for all the flash play they get at Murrayfield, when they go on the road, there's something fundamentally just they're not as strong as the other nations. They don't have as many good players. They don't, and for at home they're very good, but Ireland should never have lost to them last year. England, when the cards were on the table or the chips were down, England hammered them, and when the pressure was all on them going to Wales last week, Wales could have fallen back on the injuries and all that stuff, but they still had player by player, they had the better players, and it came out, and they probably had the better coach, and it came out in the end. And Gatland once again has proven himself
the great survivor of international
He gets written off all
rugby.
the time, and like sometimes we got to step back and go, what a career! Like, this is 10 Six Nations, I think,
Yeah. Oh, well, look, he's an outstanding coach, no doubt about that. The credentials speak for themselves, but
he's benefiting from that Scarlets infusion. Everything good happening at the weekend was basically from the Scarlets.
Well, Pivac is a guy, in fairness, all the noise coming out of that camp, but in fairness, the results back it up. But the guys love playing for him, and obviously he's
Jones as well. They love Stephen Jones.
Yeah, and actually, I haven't worked with Stephen Jones or played alongside him in the Lions 2009. Like, the guy, really, really good character, lovely chap, very knowledgeable on the game, and calm, which is kind of important. You need to be able to deliver messages, and you can see that in the Scarlets because they're able to hang on in tight circumstances, but they deliver and they're calm themselves. You can see there's a confidence, there's a quiet confidence in them. They're able, like, all the forwards are all able to deliver, passes under pressure. The whole team plays with quiet confidence. So you can see the influence of those two guys, and I thought Wales showed it on the weekend.
With a message in from Mike McGann, it's not even a question. Well done, Luke. Great on the BBC. You were excellent.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I was listening and I was hoping to hear when we were talking on the left wing with Will Slattery the other day.
I wasn't able to drop it in there. The opportunity just didn't come
would have been
up.
felt a bit forced, perhaps.
Perhaps. Look, sure, we'll see. Hopefully I'll get another opportunity.
In fairness to Gregor Townsend, I saw him put up a funny tweet of him, like the meme of Homer Simpson slinking into
That wasn't him. That was a parody account.
Fair enough.
Because I saw it as well.
I thought that was a little unusual, but I also saw fair play to him because he does tweet a lot.
He does tweet a lot, and actually a really good guy and a really good coach. Look, they've made it. There's an error there. I'm pretty sure he's not looking after their defence. So whoever's the defensive coach, I think that was the bigger error. They never recovered from big phases of play, and then even some of the stuff, like, they got caught with, like, from, obviously the intercept at the start was a bit of a brain fart. I mean, taking 2 steps and throwing a big long skip pass against an international team. It was a disaster for them to start. I haven't got off to a really good start as well. But defensively, letting teams go through you can happen on an international level. If they're going to score a try, make sure it's outside you, and that's just rule number 1 of any defensive system.
So Wales go to Twickenham next weekend. Rory sets up an absolute belter. England, I know they were playing Italy, but they did look very sharp in attack. The forward Farrell axis in particular, like in the first, maybe 30 minutes, they carved them open a couple of times. Easy tries for Watson in the corner. Impressed? Yeah,
I think they were operating in second, third gear for a lot of the time. Whenever they needed to, they just changed it up. They looked like a really, really good team, really accurate. Farrell looked really good, and Ford, who's got copping a lot of flack over in England, I thought played quite well as well. Now, he was given armchair ride quite a lot. I thought Simmons looked very good again.
He's absolutely rapid.
He's so quick, but again, it's against Italy. I'd like to see him up against the Welsh pack next week, but you've got to be impressed by a team who win as regularly as they do, and I don't think, for all that they played some nice bits, Italy, they kind of played into England's hands at times as well. Like last year, they made themselves really difficult to play against by, using the rule book really, really cleverly. But yesterday they tried to take England on, and they played some lovely stuff at times, but they were quite inaccurate. England were always going to beat Italy. I think we're going to get a good test of both Wales and England next week, and I think that's the game of the weekend without a doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think that'll be, as Rory says, that'll be the real gauge where those two teams are at. I mean, from an Italian perspective, again, look, I sound like I got it completely wrong on the weekend. As I always say, I thought the French and the Irish match was kind of more a reflection of how I usually feel opening weekends are. It's where it's really tight defensively. It's the easiest thing to get organised quickly. Italy, I mean, the two guys, Costello and Boney in the centre, I mean, they really, really struggled. They were at sea at times, and they made Ford and Farrell look really, really good. And that's that third playmaker. That gives you that little bit of indecision. And if a team gets momentum in the tight, and Italy's defending in the tight was very poor at times. And that, I mean, once that happened, they looked all at sea in the centres, and I thought they looked really poor.
Like, I know Eddie Jones is a massive Mike Brown fan, but think of the potential if you had Watson a fullback, Noel and May on the wings. Like that would be some back three with Ford and Farrell pulling the strings.
Yeah, but I do think that I'm a really big Mike Brown fan. I hate all the stuff on the pitch where he seems to be in every row. But leaving that aside, I mean, he's an outstanding footballer, you know, and I think he's a great kicker of the ball, very solid under the high ball. He's a brilliant tackler. It's great to have a good tackler at full back. There's not many teams do have one, and it's a really difficult place to defend as well. But you know, it's great to have someone there who can bail you out. And he almost bailed them out at the end in that try for that Italian try in the corner.
It's the same discussion we're having with Rob Kearney. You know, everyone wants, people want to see, say, Jordan Larmour put back there, but what you lose, it's the same with Watson. What you lose in Mike Brown's solidity, I think, is a similar thing. Did you notice they copied the Johnny Sexton wraparound? England robbing a bit into the Joe Schmidt playbook.
Yeah, well, you know, you could probably see that there's a little bit of like, I mean, you see that all the time. You see it kind of a little bit more for me playing at kind of interpro level or at Pro 14 or
everyone's stealing everything from
everyone. There is. Well, I mean, if you're watching rugby all the time, you're going to get an idea here and there, and you're going to try and fit it into your game plan if there's something that you like or you feel like, do you know what, I've got the personnel for that. That'll be really good. And I actually think Glasgow do a lot of stuff that lends. You know, you see that the crossover all the time. It shows to me that someone goes, you know what, actually that guy's a good coach and that's a good idea. Let's do that.
Okay, we'll move on to Ireland, Italy now. Just 1 second. We got another message in. Jer Ackerman now. I agree with Mike McGann. Luke was compulsive listening on the BBC. I don't know if these are these aliases that you would send up in advance. I don't know.
Oh yeah, a few people teed up. Yeah, to be honest with you, I really, when he said compulsive, I was thinking, God, where's he going with that? Thankfully, it was a nice one. But look, it's good. It's great to keep in touch with the games, and it helps when we're coming in here, so that you've been to the game, because you get to see a little bit more from. Like, look, I love the TV coverage myself, but at the same time, I got to experience a great atmosphere in the Stade.
How was Brian Moore and Eddie Butler?
Brian Moore, they were actually really, really good. Brian Moore was great fun. He'd actually had a very funny one on the HIAs. He was saying, well, Leicester's, I think it was it Jalabert, Leicester Jalabert's head or brain is located in his knee. That's not a HIA. But look, it was interesting. They were great fun, and Eddie Butler's, you know.
Does he just sound like that all the time?
I found myself, I think, like, it's very unusual, as I'm sure you can tell, that I'm quiet. And there was about 4 or 5 minutes where I said, Jesus, I actually better say something. I've been listening to Eddie Butler. And he's kind of one of those voices that you kind of associate with.
You feel like you're living in a montage.
Yeah, it was. Look, it was great. You get, like, anytime you get to see people who are really, really good at their job up close, it's to try and be a sponge. Exactly, Will. Look, that's why I come on leaps and bounds, and Rory as well. But look, I have to say, it was a great game to be involved in. It was great to be at the game and see some of the things where I feel like, you know, I know Joe Schmidt will have a few. They always have extra cameras at the game, the coaches, so they don't just have or they get all the footage from the camera. They have a few of their own. I'd be very interested to see if they try. Look, it depends how Italy defend. First of all, we'll say that, but I think they're going to try and fit in a few more attacking kicks into their game, and I think they'll feel like there's a few areas that, if you're looking up top from the game, that are easy to fix. And I think Ireland will be an awful lot better for the rest of the championship.
Rory, who would you like to see come into the team this weekend?
I would like to see Jordan Larmour come in. I think this is a perfect opportunity for him to come in. I would say probably you'd leave Keith Earls and Rob Kearney there and maybe put him in the right wing, with Stockdale missing out. You know, not writing him off by any means, but I think it's time to see Jordan Larmour. I believe he's doing really well in training. So that's one. I think the rest of the back line you'd probably leave as is. Dan Levy's going to come in for Josh van der Fleer. I think that's certain.
Is there a possibility Johnny Sexton might get rested?
I wouldn't have thought so. I think this is too important to meddle with your half-back partnership. I think Joey Carberry will come on for a good portion of the game.
Would it not be an ideal time, like you saw how Italy got pretty badly beaten by England, we're at home, would it not be an ideal time to give Carberry a meaningful match?
But that was the first choice England team, and there's a reason. I think there'd be a great opportunity to bring the guys in with 30 minutes to go, as long as you've had a really good solid start. And there's lots of areas, like I think that Italian front row isn't what it used to be, and I think I'd love to see Ireland really attack them there, because I think there's an opportunity to put pressure on, lay down a marker. I think Conor and I do think Johnny will benefit from a bit of time against Italy as well, a bit of continuity, because they're going to have a 2-week break after this, and I think there's still a few parts of their games from an Irish perspective where I think they'll like to tighten things up just a little bit. I thought for Conor, who's probably, like as I said earlier on, probably the best box kicker in the game, I thought he had a bit of an off day there, and it'd be good to see him just get a little bit more time there. And then, like I said, 30 minutes to go, have your Luke McGrath come on, have your Joey Carberry, whoever else down the back three. I'd love to see Jordan Larmour as well. I think he's really exciting. I got to talk to one of the staff just before kick-off, before the lads were coming out, and he said he's training the house down there. You know, he's made the transition, easily in terms of training. Now you need to expose the guy at the next level, and he's so exciting. He just has it all for me. The defensive parts, still a bit to figure out. But that's where you need to be put in those situations, maybe to have a bit of a learning curve moment where you say, Jesus, that needs to be better in my game. So it seems like a humble kid to me. I think he'll get there. He needs to be put in.
And Ireland are 31-point favourites, Rory, so it's a big expectation on them to maybe right some of the wrongs of last weekend and put up a big score. Do you think that they will be able to put Italy away fairly comfortably?
I think so. I think it was 3 years ago they struggled in Rome on the opening day, but in the last 2 years they have absolutely obliterated Italy. And I think they, coming off a 6-day turnaround, Conor O'Shea says he's going to have to make some changes. He doesn't have a huge amount of depth to work with, and his first team wasn't great yesterday. I think there's definitely scope for Ireland to at least get the bonus point, and I think they need to build a bit of a score, because I think this tournament is looking like it's going to get very tight towards the end. So, look, I don't think you would weaken it by bringing, say, a Joey Carberry in either. I think that the bench is going to play a big role in building a score against a tired Italian team towards the end, and I'd be fully confident of a big win for Ireland on Saturday.
Luke, there's actually one question in for you just to finish up. Joe Fitzgibbon. Hello, Luke. 50 plus points against Italy? Question mark.
Yeah, I think so. And the reason I would say, now look, we're talking about snow coming in this evening here, so conditions could be a factor. But I think and I kind of covered, I touched on this earlier on, and why we struggle a little bit for me against Wales and France. They're really, really big men. They're excellent at defending in the tight channels. You won't have that problem against Italy, and Ireland are really, really accurate in that area. And I think there's going to be loads of opportunities for Ireland to get some momentum in the tight exchanges, and off the back of that, Ireland are really, really dangerous. When you have Johnny Sexton with a bit of momentum from the tight channels, running the plays outside, and when you have Bundy Akey and Robbie Henshaw, who are, let's face it, big specimens, they'll just keep getting momentum. I can't see Italy being able to stop that, and hopefully we'll have someone like Jordan Larmour and maybe a Keith Earls on there to hopefully get themselves in a bit of space with some good ball and put a few tries away.
Well, brilliant stuff. Luke, Rory, thank you so much for joining us. And that's all we have time for on the Left Wing Live tonight in association with Aer Lingus. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back next week to review Ireland versus Italy. In the meantime, if you want to take part in that competition, you can go to independent.ie/the Left Wing Comp. So until next week, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.